pretend to be my fiancée at the Christmas ball?" he asked. She agreed, but his one condition changed everything. No real feelings allowed. Lady Malene Winterbourne had been invisible for years, mocked, dismissed, forgotten. Then the Duke of Stormholt offered her one night to matter, one night to prove them all wrong. But some rules are made to be broken, and falling in love was never part of the plan. Before we begin, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt invisible? Like you're standing in a crowded room but no one truly sees you? Tonight's story is for everyone who has ever been overlooked, dismissed, or told they weren't enough. If that's you, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button now, because this channel is your sanctuary, a place where every story reminds you that your worth was never up for debate. It was always there, waiting for the right person to recognize it. Now let's begin. The December wind howled through the ancient oaks surrounding Winterbourne Manor, their bare branches clawing at the grey sky. Inside the grand drawing room, Lady Malene Winterbourne sat in her usual corner, a book balanced on her lap, doing her utmost to become invisible. Poor Malene. Her cousin Lavenia's voice drifted across the room, deliberately loud. 26 years old and still without prospects. Mama says it's quite tragic, really. Malene's fingers tightened on the book's binding, but she kept her eyes fixed on the page. Responding only encouraged them. "Perhaps she prefers the company of her novels to that of gentlemen," Beatrice added with a tinkling laugh, though one cannot help but wonder if the choice was ever truly hers to make. Lady Amelia looked up from her embroidery. "Girls, that is quite enough." But her reprimand lacked conviction. Malene rose with as much dignity as she could muster. "If you'll excuse me, I believe I shall take some air." She swept from the room, allowing herself a single shuddering breath once the door closed. How many more years of this could she endure? "Careful, madam." The deep voice startled her. "You nearly collided with me." Malene looked up sharply into the darkest eyes she had ever seen, black as midnight, set in a face of striking masculine beauty. The gentleman was tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders in an impeccably tailored black coat. "Forgive me," she stammered. "I did not see you there." Evidently, his gaze swept over her. "You are Lady Malene, I presume?" "I am." "And you are?" "Adrian Redwood, Duke of Stormholt. I arrived not 20 minutes ago." The Duke of Stormholt, wealthy beyond measure, devastatingly handsome, and utterly opposed to matrimony. At 32, he had evaded every matchmaking mama in England. The gossip said he was cold, calculating, and cared for nothing save his estates. "Welcome to Winterbourne Manor, Your Grace," Malene said. "I hope your journey was not too disagreeable." "Tolerable." He studied her with unsettling intensity. "You were fleeing something just now." Malene felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I was seeking some air. In the middle of winter. How invigorating." His mouth quirked. "Or perhaps you were escaping your cousins. I overheard their conversation." Quite enlightening. Mortification washed over her. "Your Grace, do not apologize. It was their cruelty, not yours. Though I confess myself curious why you tolerate it. What choice do I have?" The words escaped before she could stop them. "I am an unmarried woman of 26. Society has pronounced its verdict. I am to be tolerated, pitied, and forgotten. Fighting would only provide further entertainment." Something flickered in those dark eyes. "How pragmatic of you." "It is called survival, Your Grace." "Indeed." He was silent, still studying her. "Tell me, Lady Malene, do you ride?" The abrupt change caught her off guard. Yes, though it has been some time. Tomorrow morning then, 7 o'clock. Meet me at the stables." He turned to leave, then paused. "And Lady Malene, bring your courage. I suspect you may need it." Before she could respond, he was gone. Malene stood frozen, her heart pounding. What on earth had just happened? The dinner that evening was torturous. The dining room could seat 40, but tonight there were only 15. Family and a few acquaintances who had arrived early for Christmas festivities. Malene found herself in her usual position, far from her parents, wedged between her unmarried cousin Harriet and elderly Mr. Blackwood, who was quite deaf. It was a placement that spoke volumes about her status. The Duke of Stormholt sat in the seat of honor beside her mother. From her distant vantage point, Malene could see him engaging in polite conversation, his expression carefully neutral. He wore evening attire with effortless elegance, black coat and white cravat emphasizing the stark beauty of his features. "The Duke is even more handsome than the rumors suggest," Lavinia said loudly, "though it is quite peculiar that he chooses to remain unwed." One would think a man in his position would have secured an heir by now. Perhaps he finds the ladies of the ton lacking, Beatrice suggested with a coy smile. Meline focused intently on her venison, willing herself to disappear. Harriet leaned close and whispered, "Do not develop any foolish notions about the Duke, Meline. A man of his consequence would never consider someone like you. He needs an heiress, not a charity case." The words struck like physical blows, but Meline kept her expression serene. "Miss Harriet." The Duke's voice cut through the chatter like a knife. The entire table fell silent. "I could not help but overhear your comment," he continued, his tone conversational, but his eyes cold as winter frost. "I wonder if you might enlighten me. What precisely constitutes a charity case in your estimation?" Harriet's face drained of colour. "Your Grace, I merely meant, because in my experience," Adrian continued smoothly, "those who concern themselves with categorizing others are often desperately trying to secure their own precarious positions. Would you agree?" The silence was absolute. Harriet looked as though she might faint. Earl Joseph cleared his throat. "Your Grace, I apologize if—" "No apology necessary," Adrian said smoothly. "I was merely engaging Miss Harriet in philosophical discussion. Though perhaps the topic is too complex for the dinner table." He turned to Lady Amelia with a charming smile. "Lady Winterbourne, you were telling me about the Christmas ball." The conversation resumed, but the atmosphere had changed. Meline could feel eyes upon her, curious, speculative, confused. Why would a duke defend her? She risked a glance toward the head of the table and found Adrian looking directly at her. He raised his wineglass in the smallest of salutes. Despite herself, Meline felt her lips curve into a smile. Perhaps survival was not her only option after all. The next morning dawned cold and crisp. Meline woke before dawn, her conversation with the Duke playing on endless repeat. She should not go. It would fuel gossip and likely result in humiliation when he failed to appear. And yet, at 6:45, Meline found herself dressed in her riding habit. Dark green, several years out of fashion, but serviceable. She crept through the silent house, avoiding servants. The stables were warm, sweet with hay and leather. Meline had always loved this place. "You came." She spun to find Adrian emerging from a stall, leading a magnificent black stallion. He wore riding attire that made him look even more imposing. "I said I would," Meline replied. "Did you doubt me?" "Most ladies of my acquaintance say many things they do not mean." He studied her. "I am pleased to discover you are not among them. This is midnight, and I have had shadow prepared for you." A grey mare stood waiting. Meline approached carefully, stroking the velvet nose. "She's beautiful," Meline murmured. "As are you." Meline froze. When she turned, Adrian was still watching her with intense focus. "Your Grace, No one is here to overhear us. My name is Adrian." That would be highly improper. So would meeting a gentleman at dawn for a clandestine ride. He moved closer. "I think we have already ventured beyond propriety. Why did you ask me here?" "Because I have a proposition for you, but first, let us ride." They rode across frost-covered fields in silence. The sun rose, transforming the landscape into something magical. Meline had forgotten how much she loved this. The freedom, the wind, the sense of being untethered. When they slowed near a small wood, her cheeks were flushed and her breathing rapid. "You ride well," Adrian observed. "Better than most ladies I have encountered." They dismounted. Adrian led the horses to a fallen log, then turned to face her. "I find myself in a predicament, Lady Meline. I am 32 and unwed. This has begun to cause complications, rumors, questions about my character. The gossips have become vicious. My mother writes weekly, begging me to secure a wife. I fail to see how this concerns me. I attended your dinner last night and observed how they treat you, with pity, with condescension. We are both victims of societal expectations, both judged and found wanting. That may be true, but I propose an arrangement, a temporary one. Your father mentioned the Christmas ball in 2 weeks. I propose that you pretend to be my fiancée for the evening." The world tilted. "I beg your pardon?" "Think about it. One evening as an engaged couple. I gain respectability. You gain the satisfaction of watching everyone who ever mocked you realize they were wrong. Your cousins will see you on the arm of one of England's most eligible dukes. And after the ball, we quietly end the engagement, mutual agreement, no scandal, but we will have accomplished our goals." Meline's mind raced. There would be conditions, First, we must be convincing. Second, the separation must be handled delicately. And third, there can be no genuine sentiment involved. This is business, nothing more. We must not allow ourselves to be deceived by our own fiction. Something flickered across Adrian's face. You propose a rule. No real feelings. Precisely. Do you agree? He extended his hand. I agree to your terms. We shall be the most convincing false engagement in history. Malene placed her hand in his. We have an accord, Your Grace. Adrian, if we are to be engaged, you must call me Adrian. Very well, Adrian. The way he said her name sent a shiver down her spine. A beautiful name for a beautiful woman. You need not practice flattery when we are alone. But as they walked back to their horses, Malene wondered whether she had just made the wisest decision of her life, or the most foolish. The following days passed in a dreamlike haze. Adrien spent considerable time in Malene's company, much to everyone's astonishment. They took daily rides, walked through frost-covered gardens, and sat together in the library for hours. To any observer, they appeared to be conducting a proper courtship. So why did it feel so dangerously real? I confess, I am utterly baffled, Lady Amelia said one afternoon. The Duke has shown more interest in you these past 3 days than any gentleman has in 6 years. What can it mean? Malene kept her expression neutral. Perhaps he simply enjoys intelligent conversation, Mama. But darling, he is a duke. He could have his pick of any lady in England. Why would he choose to spend his time with... She trailed off. With me, Malene finished. Perhaps you underestimate me, Mama. What no one knew was that their time together had become far more than pretense. During their conversations, Malene had discovered a man of surprising depth. Adrian was well-read, wickedly intelligent, and possessed a dry wit that made her laugh. He was also dangerously easy to care for. Tell me about your childhood, Adrian said one afternoon in the portrait gallery. Snow fell outside, creating a hushed atmosphere. There is little to tell. I was an ordinary child who grew into an ordinary woman. I do not believe that for a moment. He stopped before a portrait of a young girl with dark curls. Is this you? When I was 12, before I understood what it meant to be a disappointment. Adrian studied her face. Who made you believe you were a disappointment? Everyone. The word escaped before she could stop it. My mother, who grew weary of presenting me to society. My father, who stopped looking at me with pride. My cousins, who found entertainment in my failure. Everyone. And why do you suppose you received no proposals? Malene laughed bitterly. I am not beautiful. I am too tall, too plain, too serious. I speak my mind when I should be demure. I read books when I should practice pianoforte. I am everything a gentleman does not want. How very fortunate for those gentlemen, Adrian said quietly, that I am not interested in what they want. Malene's breath caught. They stood very close now. When had he moved closer? Close enough that she could see silver flecks in his dark eyes, smell sandalwood. Adrian, she whispered, we should not what? Speak honestly. He reached up and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. One advantage of our arrangement is that we need not dissemble. I find you fascinating. Your height is elegant, your features striking, and your intelligence intoxicating. If the gentlemen of London were too blind to see that, they deserve their vapid wives. You are merely being kind. I am never merely kind. His hand lingered near her face. I am being honest, something I suspect you have not experienced enough. For a long moment they stood frozen, the falling snow creating a curtain beyond the windows. Malene was acutely aware of how easy it would be to close the distance, to discover if his lips were as warm as his touch. We should return to the house, she whispered, stepping back. It is nearly time for tea. Of course, we must maintain propriety after all. But as they walked back through the corridors, Malene could not shake the feeling that their carefully constructed arrangement was beginning to crack at the foundations. The cracks became fissures on the 5th day. Adrian insisted on teaching Malene to waltz in the empty ballroom. We must appear natural together, he explained, as servants lit candles. If we stumble through the first dance, no one will believe our engagement is genuine. He was right, but Malene had not anticipated what it would feel like to be held in his arms, his hand warm at her waist, his other hand clasping hers. She had not expected how her body would respond to his proximity. Adrian was an excellent dancer, his movements smooth and confident. Malene found herself relaxing into his lead, trusting him completely. You dance beautifully, he murmured as they swept across the floor. Why did no one ever notice? Because no one ever asked me to dance. When you stand against the wall long enough, you become invisible. Adrian's arm tightened around her waist. Then they were fools, every one of them. You keep saying that, but what? You do not believe me. He spun her suddenly, pulling her closer. Meline, look at me. She raised her eyes to his, drowning in the intensity there. I am many things, arrogant certainly, difficult undoubtedly. But I am not a liar. When I tell you that you are remarkable, I mean every word. When I tell you that society's judgment is worthless, I speak absolute truth. And when I tell you that any man would be fortunate to call you his wife, I am being more sincere than I have been about anything in my life. Adrien, I know what we agreed. No real feelings, a temporary arrangement. But Meline, I must confess, no. She pulled away abruptly. Please do not say whatever you are about to say. Why not? Because once words are spoken, they cannot be unspoken. We have an agreement, Adrien. A rule. The moment one of us breaks it, everything falls apart. And if the rule is impossible to keep, Meline closed her eyes, then we must try harder. She heard him move closer, felt the warmth of his presence. What if I do not want to try harder? He asked, his voice rough. What if I want to break every rule we established? What if I want to tell you that these past 5 days have been the most extraordinary of my life? What if I want to confess that when I look at you, I forget every reason I ever had for avoiding matrimony? Stop. The word came out as a plea. Please, Adrien, if you have any mercy, stop. For a long moment, silence filled the ballroom. Then she felt him step back, felt the absence of his warmth, like a physical loss. Forgive me, he said formally. I have overstepped. It will not happen again. Meline turned to find him bowing stiffly, his expression the cool, aristocratic mask he wore for society. I should return to my chambers. We can continue our preparations tomorrow. As you wish, Lady Meline. The formal address stung, but as she fled the ballroom, Meline told herself it was for the best. They had a rule for a reason. Feelings led to hurt, to disappointment, to pain. She absolutely would not allow herself to fall in love with the Duke of Stormholt, even if it was already far too late to stop it. The next 3 days were agony. Adrien maintained polite distance, treating Meline with courtesy he might show any casual acquaintance. They still took their daily rides, still appeared together at meals, but the warmth was gone. Her family noticed immediately. It seems the Duke has lost interest, Lavinia said smugly over breakfast. How very predictable. I suppose even he has his limits when it comes to charity cases. Meline focused on her tea, refusing to give her cousin satisfaction, but the words cut deep, confirming every fear. I think you are wrong, Lavinia, Charlotte interjected quietly. I think the Duke cares for Meline very much. Anyone who watched them could see it, the way he looks at her when he thinks no one is observing. Then why has he grown so distant? Lavinia challenged. Perhaps, Charlotte said, because he is frightened. The words hung in the air and Meline felt something shift in her chest. Could it be true? Could Adrian's withdrawal be born of fear? That afternoon, Meline sought refuge in the library. She was so absorbed in her book that she did not hear the door open. Hiding again? Meline looked up to find Adrien in the doorway, still in riding clothes, his dark hair windswept. I am reading, not hiding. Is there? He moved into the room, closing the door, because it seems to me that we have both been hiding these past 3 days. From the truth, from each other, from what we both know is happening between us. Adrien, please, no, Meline, no more running. He crossed the space in 3 strides and pulled her to her feet, his hands gripping her shoulders. I have tried to respect your wishes. I have tried to maintain distance, but I cannot do it anymore. I cannot pretend that this is merely an arrangement when every moment with you makes me question every decision I have ever made. You're not making sense. I am making perfect sense, and you know it. His hands tightened. I told myself I would never marry because I watched my parents destroy each other. I swore I would never subject myself to that emptiness. But then I met you, and everything I thought I knew became irrelevant. This is the arrangement talking. We have been playing at engagement and the lines have blurred. Once the ball is over, I am going to ask your father for permission to truly court you, because I do not want a temporary arrangement, Meline. I want a real engagement, a real marriage, a real life with you. Meline felt tears prick her eyes. You do not mean that. Why can I not? Because men like you do not marry women like me, the words burst out. You are a duke. You could have any woman in England. Why would you choose someone rejected by society? Someone whose own family barely tolerates her? Is that truly what you believe? That you bring me nothing? What else am I to believe? He stepped back, running his hand through his hair. Meline, when I look at you, do you know what I see? She shook her head. I see a woman who has endured years of cruelty with grace that humbles me. A woman whose intelligence intimidates lesser minds. A woman who reads voraciously, thinks deeply, and speaks with honesty rarer than diamonds. He moved closer. I see a woman whose smile makes my heart beat faster, whose laughter is the most beautiful sound, whose courage in facing rejection makes me ashamed of my own cowardice. Adrian, I see the woman I want to wake beside every morning for the rest of my life, the woman I want to share everything with, the woman I want to build a life with. A tear slipped down Meline's cheek. I am frightened. So am I. He cupped her face, thumbs wiping away tears. I'm terrified because this is real and real things can hurt us, but I would rather face that fear with you than spend the rest of my life in comfortable numbness. What if it does not work? What if it does, he countered. What if we are brave enough to reach for what we want? Meline stared up at him, her heart warring with her mind. I am falling in love with you. I have been trying not to, but I am, and it terrifies me. Adrian's smile was like sunrise. Good, because I am already hopelessly in love with you, and it would be unfair if I had to suffer alone. Then he kissed her. It was a claiming, a declaration, a promise. Meline melted into him, her entire world narrowing to this moment. When they broke apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. We are going to cause a scandal. Undoubtedly, Meline agreed, but I find I no longer care. That is because you are finally free, my darling. Free to be yourself, free to be loved, free to be mine. And you are mine. No more running, no more hiding, no more pretending. The morning of the Christmas ball dawned clear and cold. The entire household was in organized chaos. Servants rushing about, guests arriving, the ballroom being transformed. Meline stood at her bedroom window, watching carriages arrive. In a few hours, she would descend the staircase on Adrian's arm and face everyone who had dismissed her. But everything had changed. This was no longer performance. This was real. Meline, Charlotte slipped into the room. You have been standing at that window for nearly an hour. Are you well? I am overwhelmed. Everything is happening so quickly. Just 2 weeks ago I was invisible. Now I am to be engaged to a duke. Charlotte moved beside her. Officially engaged. You know. Meline turned in surprise. You know? But how? I suspected from the beginning. The Duke looked at you with too much calculation at first, but then that changed. He looks at you now as though you are the sun and he a planet caught in your orbit. He wants to make it real, the engagement. He says he will speak to father after the ball. And what do you want? Such a simple question, yet Meline struggled to answer. She had spent so long training herself not to want anything. I want to believe it is possible. I want to believe that someone like Adrian could genuinely love someone like me. But Charlotte, I am so frightened. What if his family objects? What if society refuses to accept me? What if he realizes he has made a mistake? Charlotte took her hand. Those are valid fears. But answer me this, do you love him? Yes, Meline whispered. Heaven help me, but I do. Then that is all that matters. Love is always a risk, but some risks are worth taking. As afternoon turned to evening, Winterbourne Manor transformed. Thousands of candles illuminated every room. Evergreen garlands draped the banisters. In the ballroom, crystal chandeliers sparkled. Meline's mother had insisted on a new gown, deep sapphire silk, with delicate silver embroidery. It was the finest thing Meline had ever worn. When she looked in the mirror, she hardly recognized herself. You look like a princess, my lady, Susan said. The Duke will not be able to take his eyes off you. A knock at the door revealed Lady Amelia, dressed in burgundy. Meline, Her mother stopped, eyes widening. My darling girl, you look absolutely beautiful. Thank you, Mama. Lady Amelia crossed the room and took Meline's hands. I owe you an apology. For years I have allowed others' opinions to color my treatment of you. I convinced myself that by lowering expectations, I was protecting you. But I see now that I was only adding to your pain. Mama, please, let me finish. Watching the Duke court you has shown me what I should have seen all along. You are extraordinary, Meline. Intelligent, kind, resilient. Any man would be fortunate to call you his wife. Meline embraced her mother, years of hurt beginning to heal. Now, Lady Amelia said, stepping back, the Duke is waiting in the portrait gallery. He wishes for a private moment before you face the masses. Go to him, darling. Do not keep him waiting. The portrait gallery was dimly lit, only a few candles illuminating the paintings. Meline found Adrian before her childhood portrait, the one they had looked at together. He turned at her approach, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. He was resplendent in formal evening attire, black coat, snowy cravat, a dark blue waistcoat that matched her gown perfectly. Meline, he breathed, you are absolutely magnificent. You clean up rather well yourself. Adrian closed the distance and took her hands. Before we go down, I need to tell you something, several things actually. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, just honest. He took a deep breath. When I first proposed our arrangement, I told you it was to silence gossip. That was partially true, but not the whole truth. Meline frowned. What do you mean? I mean I had already decided you were remarkable before I ever spoke to you. I spent days observing you, watching how your family treated you, how you carried yourself despite their cruelty. You were like a puzzle I desperately wanted to understand. You were watching me? I was fascinated by you. Here was a woman who should have been broken, and yet you maintained your dignity, your intelligence, your goodness. When I overheard your cousins that day, I knew I had to do something. The fake engagement was partially self-serving, yes, but it was also my way of giving you what you deserved, a chance to show society they were wrong. So even in the beginning you cared. Even in the beginning I cared. I was simply too much of a coward to admit it. I told myself I was being pragmatic, but the truth is I was already half in love with you before we made our agreement. Adrian, I know I should have told you, but I was frightened you would refuse if you knew my true motivations. Adrian pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a stunning ring, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds. This belonged to my grandmother. She was a remarkable woman, strong-willed, intelligent, utterly unimpressed by social conventions. My grandfather fell in love with her despite his family's objections. They were married for 47 years and were deeply happy. He looked up, and she could see everything laid bare: love, hope, fear, vulnerability. I had planned to give this to you after I spoke with your father, but I cannot wait. Meline Winterbourne, will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife, not as pretense, not as arrangement, but in truth? Will you marry me, knowing that I am difficult and proud? Will you take a chance on a man who was foolish enough to think he could pretend to love you when the reality was inevitable from the first moment? Meline felt tears streaming down her face. Yes, yes, Adrian, I will marry you. I will take that chance. He slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit. Then he kissed her with tenderness that made her heart ache. When they broke apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. Are you ready to face the wolves? With you beside me, I could face anything. Good, because I intend to make quite the announcement this evening. I hope you do not mind having your private moment made very public. Meline laughed. I thought we were supposed to be subtle. Plans change. I want all of London to know that you are mine, and I am yours. Let them gossip. Let them realize they were complete fools forever overlooking you. As they walked toward the ballroom, Meline felt rightness settle over her. This was what she had been waiting for. Not just love, but partnership. Not just acceptance, but celebration. The Duke of Stormholt had asked her to pretend to be his fiancée at the Christmas ball, but there would be no pretending tonight. The ballroom was already crowded when they arrived at the top of the grand staircase, a glittering sea of silks and jewels. Meline could see hundreds of faces turned upward, could hear the sudden hush. Ladies and gentlemen, the butler's voice rang out. His Grace, the Duke of Stormholt, and Lady Meline Winterbourne. They descended together, Adrian's hand covering hers possessively. Meline kept her chin high, even as she felt hundreds of eyes boring into her. She could see Lavenia's shocked expression, Harriet's dropped jaw, her cousin's complete disbelief. At the bottom, Earl Joseph and Lady Amelia waited with proud smiles. But it was the crowd's reaction that struck Meline most. The whispered speculations, the envious glances, the sudden realization dawning on face after face that they had been wrong about her. Adrian led her to the center of the ballroom, The orchestra ceased playing. The entire assembly fell silent. "Your Grace," Earl Joseph said formally, "we are honored by your presence." "The honor is mine, my lord," Adrian replied, his voice carrying throughout the space, "though I confess I have an ulterior motive for my attendance this evening." The crowd leaned forward collectively. Adrian turned to face Meline, taking both her hands. "2 weeks ago, I arrived at Winterbourne Manor a convinced bachelor, certain that matrimony held nothing for me but obligation. But then I met your daughter, and every certainty I possessed crumbled to dust." Gasps rippled through the assembly. "Lady Meline Winterbourne is the most extraordinary woman I have ever encountered. She is intelligent beyond measure, brave beyond comprehension, and kind beyond reason. She has endured years of society's judgment with grace I can only aspire to, and somehow, miraculously, she has agreed to become my wife." The ballroom erupted in shocked murmurs. "Lord Winterbourne," Adrian said formally, "I have not yet had the opportunity to formally request your permission. I remedy that oversight now before all of London society. May I have the honor of marrying Lady Meline?" Earl Joseph stepped forward, voice thick with emotion. "Your Grace, you have my blessing and my gratitude. I can think of no man more worthy of my daughter." The ballroom exploded in applause. Adrian raised Meline's hand to his lips, the sapphire ring catching candlelight and sending blue fire dancing across the walls. "Dance with me," he murmured. "Let us show them exactly how real this is." The orchestra began playing a waltz, the same one they had practiced. But this time there was no hesitation, no careful distance. Adrian pulled Meline into his arms and swept her across the floor with possessiveness that left no doubt about his feelings. "They are all staring," Meline whispered. "Let them stare. Let them see what true love looks like. Let them understand what fools they were to ever dismiss you." As they danced, other couples joined them, but Meline was only aware of Adrian, his strong arms, his dark eyes gazing into hers with unmistakable love. "I love you," she said, not caring who might overhear. "And I love you. Today, tomorrow, and for all the days to come. You are mine, Meline Winterbourne, and I am irrevocably yours." The waltz ended to thunderous applause. But before they could leave the floor, a voice rang out, "Your Grace, Lady Meline." They turned to find Lavinia pushing through the crowd, her face flushed. For a terrible moment, Meline braced for cruelty, but instead, Lavinia curtsied deeply. I wish to apologize. For years I have treated you abominably, Meline. I was cruel when I should have been kind. I allowed jealousy to poison my nature. You deserved better. I hope you can forgive me." Harriet stepped forward next. "Lavinia speaks for all of us. We were wrong, Meline, terribly wrong. You were never the problem. We were." Meline could be cruel now, could return every slight, but she had no room left for bitterness. "I forgive you," she said simply. "All of you. We cannot change the past, but perhaps we can build a better future." Lavinia's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. You are far more gracious than I deserve." As her cousins melted back, Adrian leaned close. "You are remarkable. Have I mentioned that recently?" "Once or twice, but I do not mind hearing it again." The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of well-wishes and congratulations. Meline danced with her father, who held her tenderly, whispering apologies. She danced with Adrian's friends, who treated her with genuine respect. She was embraced by matrons who had previously snubbed her, complimented by ladies who had once mocked her. It was everything she had dreamed of. And yet, surprisingly, it mattered less than she expected. The approval of people who had been cruel felt hollow, compared to the solid reality of Adrian's love. As midnight approached, Adrian stole her away, leading her to a small balcony overlooking the snow-covered gardens. The night was clear and cold, stars scattered across the black velvet sky. "I needed a moment alone with you," he explained, pulling her into his arms. "Away from the crowds, the gossip, the expectations. Just us." Meline wrapped her arms around his waist and rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "This is real. Everything that has happened. It is all real." "It is real," Adrian confirmed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "You are mine, I am yours, and we are about to embark on the greatest adventure of our lives. Marriage to you will certainly be an adventure. You are the most stubborn, arrogant man I have ever met. And you are the most infuriating, challenging woman in all of England. We are going to have a magnificent life together, Meline. I promise you that. Not perfect. Life is never perfect, but magnificent, full of love and laughter and partnership. I believe you, she whispered. As church bells somewhere chimed midnight, announcing Christmas Day, Adrian kissed her beneath the starlit sky. It was a kiss that tasted of new beginnings, of promises kept and promises yet to be made, of two lonely souls who had finally found their home in each other. When they returned to the ballroom, hand in hand, Meline caught sight of her reflection in one of the tall mirrors. The woman staring back was radiant, flushed with happiness, eyes bright with love, smiling with joy that transformed her completely. She was no longer the invisible spinster, the family disappointment, the woman society had dismissed. She was no longer the cautionary tale, the object of pity, the one left behind. She was the future Duchess of Stormholt. She was beloved. She was seen and valued and treasured. She was exactly who she had always been, intelligent, kind, brave. But now she had someone who recognized those qualities, who celebrated them, who loved her, not despite them, but because of them. And more importantly, she had finally learned to see her own worth, independent of society's judgment. She had learned that the right person would always recognize what others overlooked, would always see the treasure that others dismissed as worthless. The Christmas ball continued around them, but Meline barely noticed. She was too busy looking at Adrian, too busy marveling at the miracle of their love, too busy feeling grateful for the courage she had found to take a chance, to break the rules, to risk her heart one more time. Sometimes, she thought, the greatest bravery was not in refusing to hope but in daring to hope again, not in protecting yourself from pain, but in opening yourself to love despite knowing it could hurt you, not in surviving alone, but in trusting someone enough to build a life together. She had pretended to be Adrian's fiancée at the Christmas ball, but somewhere along the way, pretense had become reality, performance had become truth, and a temporary arrangement had transformed into forever. Christmas morning dawned bright and clear. Meline woke in her own bed, potentially for one of the last times as an unmarried woman, the sapphire engagement ring catching sunlight and throwing blue fire across the ceiling. It had not been a dream. She pressed her hand to her heart, feeling it race. In 2 weeks, her entire life had transformed. She was engaged to a duke. She was loved. She was finally, gloriously happy. Charlotte entered with a breakfast tray. I thought you might wish to take your morning meal in private. After last night's excitement, I imagine you need peace. You are an angel. Last night was extraordinary. Extraordinary, Charlotte agreed, settling on the bed. Miraculous. The most romantic thing anyone has ever witnessed. Meline, I have never seen you so happy. The Duke truly loves you. He does, Meline confirmed, still marveling. Charlotte, I keep waiting to wake up and discover this was all a dream. It is not a dream. Though I confess it does have the quality of a fairy tale. The dismissed spinster captures the heart of the most eligible duke in England. Meline laughed. Perhaps I have finally received my own happy ending. Oh, this is not an ending. This is only the beginning. Now you must plan a wedding, manage a ducal household, navigate society as a duchess. Your adventure is just starting. The family gathered for breakfast. Adrian arrived looking slightly worse for wear. Evidence the gentleman had celebrated well into the early hours, but his eyes lit up when he saw Meline, and he crossed to press a kiss to her hand. Good morning, my darling. I trust you slept well. I did. Once I convinced myself last night was not a fever dream. And you look as though you did not sleep at all. Your father insisted on breaking out his finest brandy to celebrate. I believe I consumed more spirits than I have in the past year, but it was worth it to see his joy. He is very proud of you, Meline. Earl Joseph raised his coffee cup. Indeed I am, though I confess, Your Grace, you gave us quite the surprise. I had suspected some understanding, but I did not anticipate such a public declaration. I am not a man who does things by half measures. When I commit to something or someone, I do so completely. That much is abundantly clear, Lady Amelia interjected. Now we must discuss wedding plans. The season begins in April. Would you prefer a London ceremony or something here at Winterbourne? Adrien glanced at Meline. That is entirely for my bride to decide, though I confess I am not inclined toward a long engagement. I have waited 32 years to find the right woman. Now that I have, I see no reason to delay. Meline felt heat rise to her cheeks. How soon are you suggesting? Would February be too precipitous? I realize it is unconventionally quick, but I find I'm quite done with convention where you are concerned. I want to begin our life together now, not months from now. February, Malene repeated. That was barely 6 weeks away. But when she thought about waiting months, the idea seemed unbearable. I think February would be perfect. Lady Amelia looked momentarily flustered. But that allows so little time. The dress, the flowers, the guest list. Then we shall keep it intimate, Adrian suggested smoothly. Family and close friends only. I have no desire for a grand spectacle. I simply want to marry Malene as soon as propriety allows. Earl Joseph chuckled. I can hardly object to a man so eager to wed my daughter. Very well, Your Grace. A February wedding it shall be. The Dowager Duchess of Stormholt arrived 3 days after Christmas. Malene had been terrified to meet her. Certain Adrian's aristocratic mother would object to his choice, but the Dowager surprised her. Finally, the elegant older woman said, pulling Malene into a warm embrace. Finally, my stubborn son has found someone worthy of him. Lady Malene, you must call me Catherine. We are to be family after all. You do not object to the match? Catherine laughed. Object? My dear girl, I am overjoyed. For years I have watched Adrian wall himself off from any possibility of love or connection. I had nearly given up hope that he would allow himself happiness. She took Malene's hands. Then he wrote to me about you, and for the first time in decades his letters contained genuine emotion. You have given my son back to me. How could I possibly object? Over the following days Malene came to adore Catherine. The Dowager was sharp-witted, kind-hearted, and possessed a refreshing disregard for pointless social conventions. She helped Malene navigate becoming a duchess, sharing stories and offering practical advice. The ton will be scandalized at first, Catherine said one afternoon as they reviewed guest lists. A duke marrying a woman deemed unmarriageable. They will gossip and speculate. That troubles me. I do not want to damage Adrian's reputation. Do not let it trouble you, Catherine said firmly. Let them gossip. Within a year they will have moved on to some other scandal, but you and Adrian will still be happy, still be in love, still be building a life together. That is all that truly matters. Adrian had returned to Stormholt Castle to attend to business, but he wrote to Malene daily. His letters were treasures she read until memorized. My darling Malene, I have been away for 3 days, and already I feel the absence like a physical ache. How did I survive 32 years without knowing you? How did I tolerate the emptiness before you illuminated it? Stormholt Castle awaits its new mistress. I have instructed the staff to prepare the Duchess's chambers. My mother assures me you favor blue, so I have had the rooms redecorated in shades of sapphire that remind me of your eyes. I hope this pleases you. I am making arrangements for our wedding journey. Would you object to Italy? I have always wanted to see Rome and Florence, but I never had sufficient motivation. Now I want to share those experiences with you, want to see the world through your eyes. I count the days until we are wed. 42 more sunrises until you become my wife in truth. Until then, know that you occupy my every thought and have completely captured my heart. Yours eternally. Adrian Malene pressed the letter to her chest, smiling foolishly. She wrote back immediately, filling pages with her own declarations and descriptions of wedding preparations. It felt extraordinary to have someone who cared about every detail of her existence. After years of being invisible, having Adrian hang on her every word felt like a miracle. The weeks passed in a blur. Dress fittings, menu planning, guest lists, floral arrangements. And through it all Catherine was there, guiding Malene while teaching her about the responsibilities she would inherit. You will have more power than you realize, Catherine said one evening by the fire. As a duchess, you will have the ability to effect real change, to establish charities, to support causes, to use your position to help those less fortunate. Do not waste that power. You have a mind and a heart. Use them both. It was the best advice anyone had given her, and Malene took it to heart, already dreaming of the good she might do. The wedding took place on a crisp February morning at the chapel on the Winterbourne estate. Despite intentions to keep it small, over 100 guests attended, family, friends, and members of society, desperate to witness the unlikely union. Malene's wedding gown was ivory silk and Bruges lace, with a train requiring 2 attendants and delicate pearl embroidery. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever worn, and it made her feel like the woman she had become, confident, loved, worthy. Charlotte and several reformed cousins served as bridesmaids, all dabbing at their eyes. You look like a princess, Charlotte whispered, adjusting Maline's veil. Technically, I am about to marry a duke, which is rather better than a prince. Her father arrived to escort her, tears in his eyes. My darling girl, I am so very proud of you. And so very sorry for all the years I allowed you to believe you were anything less than extraordinary. Papa, no. Let me say this. I failed you. I allowed society's cruel judgments to influence how I saw you. But watching you with the Duke has shown me that you are the strongest, bravest person I know. Adrian is a fortunate man. I am equally fortunate. He sees me, Papa. I did not realize how much I needed that until I had it. Then let us not keep him waiting any longer. Your Duke is probably pacing a hole in the chapel floor. He was not wrong. When Maline entered the chapel, she could see Adrian at the altar, hands clasped behind his back. He wore formal morning dress, black coat, grey trousers, white waistcoat. But when he caught sight of her, his entire face transformed with such joy that Maline felt tears prick her eyes. The ceremony was a blur of vows and prayers, of organ music and sunlight through stained glass. Maline was aware of guests watching, her mother weeping, Catherine beaming, Charlotte grinning. But mostly she was aware of Adrian, his strong hands holding hers, his dark eyes never leaving her face, his voice steady as he promised to love and cherish her. I do, she whispered, when asked if she took this man as her husband. I do, Adrian replied, and the words held such conviction that several guests sighed. When the vicar pronounced them man and wife, Adrian did not wait for permission. He pulled Maline into his arms and kissed her with thoroughness that bordered on scandalous, earning applause and shocked gasps. I love you, he murmured against her lips. My wife, my Duchess, my Maline, and I love you, my husband, my Adrian, my everything. The wedding breakfast was held in the grand ballroom, the same ballroom where 6 weeks earlier Adrian had publicly declared his love. Now it was filled with guests celebrating their union, toasting their happiness. Lavinia approached during the reception. Your Grace, I hope I might have a word. Of course, and please, we are family. You may still call me Maline. I wanted to say again how sorry I am. Watching you today, seeing how the Duke loves you, it has made me examine my own conduct with shame. Lavinia, please, let me finish. I was cruel because I was frightened of becoming what I thought you were, unwed, dismissed, forgotten. I thought by mocking you I could distance myself from that fate. But I see now that I was wrong. You were never pitiable. You were patient, waiting for the right person to see your worth. Maline felt her heart soften completely. We all make mistakes. What matters is that we learn and do better. I hope we can build a genuine friendship now. Lavinia's eyes filled with tears. I would like that very much. Thank you for your kindness. You are a far better person than I deserve. As her cousin walked away, Adrian appeared, offering champagne and slipping his arm around her waist. You handled that with remarkable grace. Most women would have been less forgiving. I am too happy to hold grudges. Besides, I understand what drove her behavior. Fear makes us do terrible things. I am just grateful I no longer have to live in fear. You will never have to fear again. I will spend the rest of my life ensuring your happiness. Such a heavy burden. However will you manage? I suspect it will be the easiest task I have ever undertaken. Now how much longer must we remain before we can escape to begin our wedding journey? Eager to leave already? Desperately. I have been patient and proper for weeks. I find my restraint is entirely exhausted. They departed for Stormholt Castle as the winter sun set, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. The journey would take 3 hours by carriage, and Adrian had arranged for comfort, heated bricks, warm blankets, refreshments. But Maline had no interest in food or scenery. She was too busy studying her husband. The word still felt strange and wonderful, still marveling that this was her life now. You are staring, Adrian observed with amusement. I am admiring. There is a difference. Admiring what, precisely? The fact that you are real, that this is real, that I am actually married to the Duke of Stormholt and on my way to my new home. Adrian pulled her close, arranging them so she was tucked against his side. Your new home, your castle. Everything I have is now yours, Maline. I do not need castles or titles. I only need you. You have me. For today and for all our tomorrows, I am yours in every way that matters. They rode in comfortable silence, watching the winter landscape pass. Then Adrian spoke again. Do you remember our first conversation? When you said survival was all you could hope for? I remember. You will never merely survive again. From this day forward, you will flourish. You will be loved, cherished, respected. You will have everything you were denied for so long, I swear this to you. Malene turned in his arms to face him fully. Adrian, you have already given me everything. You saw me when I was invisible. You valued me when others dismissed me. You loved me when I had given up hope. Everything else is simply wonderful addition. I intend to spend our entire marriage adding wonderful things to your life, starting immediately. He kissed her then, deep and passionate, leaving no doubt about his intentions. When they broke apart, both breathing heavily, Malene rested her forehead against his. 2 more hours until we reach Stormholt. 2 hours too long, Adrian replied. They passed the time discussing their plans for the future. Adrian wanted to show her every corner of his estate, introduce her to his tenants, teach her about property management. Malene wanted to establish charitable works, create a proper library, and perhaps eventually fill the nursery with children. How many children do you envision? Adrian asked. I have not given it extensive thought, but perhaps 3 or 4, enough that they will not be lonely, but not so many that we cannot give each proper attention and love. 3 or 4 sounds perfect, Adrian agreed, his eyes holding mischief, though I confess I am more interested in the process of creating those children than in the actual number. Adrian, that is hardly proper conversation. I am conversing with my wife in the privacy of our carriage. I believe I am allowed some impropriety now. When they finally arrived at Stormholt Castle, Malene was struck by its imposing beauty. The castle was centuries old, all grey stone and soaring towers, with lights glowing warmly in hundreds of windows. The staff had assembled to greet their new Duchess. Mrs. Hensworth, the housekeeper, smiled warmly. Your Grace, we are delighted to welcome you to Stormholt. His Grace has spoken of little else but your arrival. Thank you. I am eager to learn about the household and make myself useful. Useful? Adrian interjected. Darling, you are the Duchess. You need only make yourself happy. I shall be happy making myself useful. I am not accustomed to idleness. I will need occupation beyond simply existing as your Duchess. Pride shone in Adrian's eyes. Then we shall find you all the occupation you desire. But first, he turned to the staff, that will be all for this evening. The Duchess and I wish to be alone. The staff dispersed efficiently, leaving them alone in the grand entrance hall. Alone at last, Adrian murmured, pulling Malene into his arms. Do you know how long I have been waiting for this moment? As long as I have, I imagine. Let me show you our chambers. I believe you will find them quite comfortable. He swept her up into his arms, making her gasp and laugh. Adrian, you do not need to carry me. Oh, but I do. It is tradition, and I find I am quite devoted to tradition when it suits me. The Duchess's chambers were magnificent, blue and silver with a massive 4-poster bed, but Malene had eyes only for her husband. I love you, she said simply, more than I have words to express. Then perhaps words are unnecessary. Let me show you instead how much I love you. And as the fire crackled and the winter wind howled outside, Adrian kept his promise. Later, as they lay tangled in silk sheets, moonlight streaming through windows, Malene traced patterns on Adrian's chest. I have something to confess, she said softly. Have you been harboring secrets from your husband already? We have been married less than 12 hours, wife. Do you remember our rule? The one we established when this began? No real feelings, only pretense. I remember. I broke that rule the very first day, when you defended me at dinner, when you invited me to ride. I was already halfway in love with you before we made our agreement. I just did not want to admit it. Adrian turned to face her fully. Then we are equally guilty, my darling, because I broke that rule before I even proposed it. I was falling in love with you, while still trying to convince myself this was merely practical. I just did not recognize it until too late. We are both terrible liars, it seems. The worst, Adrian agreed, pulling her close. Thank heaven for that. They fell asleep in each other's arms, 2 souls who had found their perfect match against all odds. 3 years later, the gardens at Stormholt Castle were in full bloom, roses and honeysuckle perfuming the warm June air. Malene sat on a blanket beneath an ancient oak, watching her husband chase their 2-year-old son Thomas across the grass. I'm going to catch you, Adrian declared. The Duke of Stormholt always catches his prey. Thomas shrieked with laughter. his dark curls bouncing as he ran on chubby legs, looking remarkably like his father. "Mama!" Thomas cried, throwing himself into Meline's arms. "Save me!" "I shall protect you from your fierce papa," Meline promised, holding her giggling son close. Adrian collapsed onto the blanket beside them, pulling both into his embrace. "Defeated by a woman and a small child, my reputation is quite ruined." "Your reputation as a devoted husband and father is quite secure," Meline corrected, pressing a kiss to his cheek, "which is far more important." Life at Stormholt had exceeded even Meline's most optimistic dreams. She had established 3 schools for tenants' children, organized charitable works throughout the duchy, and created one of the finest libraries in England. She and Adrian had traveled to Italy and France, had hosted gatherings, had built a life filled with love and laughter and purpose. And through it all, Adrian had been her constant companion, her greatest supporter, her truest friend. He loved her with intensity that never dimmed, cherished her with devotion that never wavered. "What are you thinking about?" Adrian asked, studying her face. "About how far I have come. 3 years ago I was invisible, dismissed, certain I would spend my life alone, and now," she gestured at the scene around them, "now I have everything I never dared to dream of." "We have everything," Adrian corrected, "because this life would be meaningless without you." He kissed her softly, then grinned. "Though I confess I am eager to expand our family, Thomas needs a sibling." "Does he?" Meline asked with a secret smile, her hand moving to her still flat stomach. Something in her tone made Adrian's eyes sharpen. "Meline, I was planning to tell you this evening, but I suppose now is as good a time as any." She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "Thomas will have a sibling by Christmas." For a moment, Adrian simply stared. Then he let out a whoop of delight that startled birds from the trees and made Thomas clap his hands with glee. Adrian kissed Meline thoroughly, then her stomach, then her lips again. "Another child. Meline, you are extraordinary. You give me everything. We give each other everything. That is the nature of true partnership, of true love." As the afternoon sun warmed the gardens and Thomas played contentedly, Meline reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had started as an unwanted guest, invisible and dismissed. She had agreed to a false engagement as a desperate attempt to matter just once. But that false engagement had transformed into the truest love she could have imagined. The Duke, who had asked her to pretend to be his fiancée at a Christmas ball, had become her husband, her partner, the father of her children, and the keeper of her heart. Sometimes Meline thought the best things in life come from taking chances, from being brave enough to reach for what seems impossible, from believing you deserve love even when the world tells you otherwise. Sometimes the greatest love stories begin with a simple question and one impossible rule. Pretend to be my fiancé, but do not fall in love. Some rules, Meline had learned, were made to be broken, and she had never been more grateful for her own rebellious heart.